Well, hello, YouTubers, and welcome to another episode of Our Haunted Travels. I am your host, Sean Donnelly.
And I'm your co-host, Mary Ann Donnelly.
Today we are talking about the Betsy Ross House.
Welcome to another episode of Our Haunted Travels with your hosts, Sean and Mary Ann Donnelly.
Alright, so the Betsy Ross House.
Yes.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is Panic D number 1048. It's located at 239 Hart Street in Philadelphia, PA. Mm-hmm. Interesting trip. When did we go there? I guess I should have looked that up.
We went there 3 years ago.
2015?
Something like that.
Could be. Yes, 2015. 16 we went on a cruise. 17 was Virginia. 2015. So anyways, Betsy Ross House.
Yes.
That was an interesting trip. We stayed outside of Philadelphia. We didn't stay downtown, and we drove in for the day, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And walked.
We did.
It was a long day.
Yes.
Right? We went to Independence Hall, we went to the Liberty Bell, we went to Betsy Ross's house,
Mutter Museum.
Well, we drove to Mutter. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it was the same day. It was a long day.
Franklin. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Franklin's house.
But did we go to Eastern Penn that same day, or was that
No, that was the following day, I think. It was either the day before or the day after.
Did a lot of locations that day. That was one of the ones where you parked the car and walked to different locations.
Yeah, because there's not really much parking.
No. And I do remember the protests.
Yes, there were protests.
We tried to steer around the protest and the 2-hour wait to see the stupid Liberty Bell. Shouldn't say stupid. The stupid 2-hour wait to see the Liberty Bell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Just to see the bell.
Yeah, and you see it for like 10 seconds,
yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, move on.
So anyways, let's talk about the Betsy Ross House.
Okay,
so the Betsy Ross House, this was the house where Betsy Ross lived when George Washington came and saw her and commissioned for her to sew the first U.S. American flag.
It was the committee. I don't know. Did George Washington actually go to? He was part of the committee.
So for the history about the house, a little bit about that committee that she talked about, watch this next video, and we will come back after that and talk about some of the paranormal claims. Be right back. Take a watch. On July 2nd, 2015, we traveled to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, into the Betsy Ross House. The building at 239 Hart Street, now known as the Betsy Ross House, was built over 250 years ago. The front portion was built around 1740, with a stairwell or piazza and a rear section added 10 to 20 years later. The structure is a variation of a bandbox-style house, with one room on each floor and a winding staircase stretching from the cellar to the upper levels. The building's front facade with a large window on the first floor to display merchandise and its proximity to the Delaware River made it an ideal location for a business. In fact, the house served as both business and residence for many different shopkeepers and artisans for more than 150 years. The first floor, front room, was used as a workshop and showroom. The business owner and his or her family lived in the rest of the house. In the 18th century, the house was occupied by a shoemaker, a shopkeeper, apothecary, and of course, most famously, an upholsterer. It is believed that Betsy Ross lived here from 1773 to 1785. By the 19th century, a German immigrant family by the name of Mund moved into the building and ran various types of businesses from it, including a tailor shop, a cigar store, and a tavern. By 1876, the building was generally recognized as a place where Betsy Ross lived, and she made the first American flag. Several of her surviving family members, including daughters, grandchildren,
and a niece said that she was at this location for the legendary event. The Munn family took advantage of the house's interesting history by posting a sign on the outside which read, "First flag of the U.S. made in this house." An 1876 advertisement for the Munn's Tavern read, "Original Flag House, Lager, Wine, and Liqueurs. This is the house where the first United flag was made by Mrs. John Ross." By the late 19th century, most of the other colonial area buildings that once stood on this block of Hart Street had been torn down and replaced with large industrial buildings and warehouses. Many people feared that Betsy's home would meet the same fate. In 1898, a group of concerned citizens established the American Flag House and Betsy Ross Memorial Association to raise money to purchase the house from the Munns, restore it, and open it as a public museum in honor of Betsy Ross and our first flag. Charles Weisgerber was one of the founding members of the Memorial Association. In 1892, he painted Birth of Our Nation's Flag, a 9x12 painting that depicts Betsy Ross presenting the first American flag to George Washington, Robert Morris, and George Ross. To raise the money to purchase the house, members of the American Flag House and Betsy Ross Memorial Association sold lifetime memberships to the organization for just 10 cents each. Each donor received a membership certificate imprinted with an image of Birth of Our Nation's flag. Individuals were encouraged to form clubs of 30 members. The person who formed the club would receive a 10-color lithograph of the Weisberger's painting suitable for framing, in addition to certificates for each club member. Weisberger moved his family into the house in 1898 and immediately opened 2 rooms to the public. The first floor front room was a souvenir shop, and the room in the back of the house where the meeting between Betsy Ross and the Flag Committee was said to have occurred was open for visitors to view. By 1937, structural changes and general wear and tear on the house led to the dire need for restoration work. Philadelphia radio mogul A. Atwater Kent offered to pay up to $25,000 for the restoration of the house. Historical architect Richard Bernard Oakey was commissioned to do the work. Under Oakey, the house's original architectural elements were spared wherever possible. Where original components could not be reused, materials were obtained from demolished homes from the same period. A small structure containing a boiler room and a restroom was constructed in the back of the original house with Revolutionary War-era bricks. In the historic house, 3 hidden fireplaces were uncovered. The front stairway and dormer were replaced, and the door leading from the kitchen to the back of the house was restored. The most notable change, however, was the front of the house. The doorway in the front of the building was moved from the western to the eastern corner, and a new window was installed. Construction was completed, and all 8 rooms of the house were open to the public on Flag Day, June 14, 1937. Atwater Kent then purchased the 2 adjacent properties to the west of the Betsy Ross House to develop a civic garden. The entire property, including the historic house and courtyard, were given to the city of Philadelphia in 1941. In 1965, an annex building was added to the property, and in 1974, the courtyard was renovated and a fountain was added. 2 years later, the remains of Betsy Ross and her third husband, John Claypool, were moved from Mount Moriah Cemetery in Eden, Pennsylvania, to the garden on the west side of the Betsy Ross House courtyard. In 1995, a private nonprofit organization, Historic Philadelphia Incorporated, began leasing the property from the city of Philadelphia and continues to manage the site. Today, the Betsy Ross House is furnished in the period in which the Betsy Ross's descendants said she lived there. Visitors can view 7 period rooms, including a kitchen, bedrooms, parlor, and the only interpretation of an 18th century upholstery shop in the country. The rooms are furnished with period antiques, 18th century reproductions, and objects that belong to Betsy Ross and her family. Highlights of the collection include Betsy Ross's walnut chest-on-chest, her Chippendale and Sheraton side chairs, her eyeglasses, her quilted petticoat, and her Bible.
So I think it's pretty interesting that the house actually still remains. Still standing.
That is pretty awesome, I have to admit.
Yeah. Been restored a few times in the video. It talks about different businesses that were there in the courtyard where Betsy Ross now, her remains supposedly are. Yeah. They think it's her. They're pretty sure it's her.
They're pretty sure. Pretty sure.
Yeah, pretty sure it's her. But there are some articles out there that says maybe not. And there's also people that's debating whether she was the first person to
make the flag.
Mm-hmm. But, hey, it is what it is. That's history. And, we'll say she is. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the paranormal. We knew a little bit before we went.
Right.
So why don't you go ahead and expound on that a little bit?
Well, I know that they're in the basement. There are claims. And I remember going specifically into those corners of the basement and trying to stay there with nobody else around. And, like you said, it was pretty busy around Philadelphia at that point. In general.
I'll show you some of those pictures while she's talking about
I had a couple of pictures that I took over there, and I was trying to stay over there to try to see if I got any EVPs, because there are stories that, or claims, that there was a gentleman that died and was left there by the one door in the basement. Mm-hmm. And so, he was left there to die. He died there, and there are claims that he and the other person, the other security guard, I can't think of security guard for some reason.
Yeah, twice actually.
Yeah. Okay. That they are often heard down there.
Ghost Hunters were there. I don't know the actual year, but I know it was season 5, episode 1. I don't know what year it was. Well, yeah, I do, because I was researching for this, but did an investigation there. Caught some EVPs. We didn't catch any.
No, we didn't. But again,
it was busy.
They may have
some
wanted
of it could have been
some
could have been other people talking. And,
right.
Yeah, just didn't quite pop out. So.
Yeah, I specifically remember the basement. I remember when we were upstairs that I went back to a specific room a second time. Like, I wanted to go back to that room. I don't know why. Yeah. But I do remember going back to that room again on the second floor.
I remember being in the basement and it was cooler down there. And I'm like, because it wasn't summer.
I was going to say, of course it's going to be cooler. It's a basement.
Yeah.
But
after walking.
Yeah.
But, we didn't get much, but it was busy and it was during regular business hours. And however, highly recommended spot if you're in Philadelphia. You definitely have to stop there because the house has been brought back, renovated. Betsy Ross's Bible, glasses, and something else is there. I think I mentioned it in the video. And, of course, her gravesite's there now.
And hers is one of the only 2.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot. Go ahead.
One of the only 2 graves that have a U.S. flag flying over them all the time, 24/7. As women.
2 women.
And the other one is also in Panic D, Jenny Wade.
Yes.
And I just remember when we were there, because we had been to Jenny Wade's grave. And now we were here at Betsy Ross's grave, and I just remember thinking, Jenny Wade's flag is so much bigger than the lady who actually made the flag.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. It's these tiny little flags. It flies over every day, all day.
But there's a bigger one in the courtyard. It's just not over her grave.
Right, but literally the one on her grave, it's so tiny. So that I remember that specifically.
Yeah. Okay, so if you've been to the Betsy Ross house or if you've investigated there, leave us some comments. Want to know if you found any information or if you just visited and what you thought about it. Like to hear from you too. Also, as always, hey folks, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell. Give us a thumbs up. You have anything else?
No.
I already closed it.
You did.
So till next time.
Thanks for watching.
And happy hunting.
If you like this video and like to see more in the future, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and give us a like below. Also, if you have any comments or suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comment section. Thanks for watching this episode of Our Haunted Travels.